The Spirit is mentioned 3 times in Mark chapter 1, verses 8, 10, and 12. Yet after this point, the Spirit is only mentioned 3 times in the remaining 15 chapters of the Gospel of Mark. Clearly, Mark is trying to tell us something with the frequent use of the word Spirit in his prologue, something that will set the stage for the rest of his Gospel. Notice these 3 uses. I baptize you with water, but he will baptize you with the Holy Spirit. Jesus saw heaven being torn open and the Spirit descending on him like a dove. At once the Spirit sent him out into the wilderness. The pouring out of the Spirit of God was a significant prophetic feature of the Old Testament eschatological texts. Till the Spirit is poured on us from on high, and the desert becomes a fertile field in Isaiah 32. I will put my Spirit in you and move you to follow my decrees, Ezekiel 36. Furthermore, the pouring out of the Spirit is linked to the Messiah. A shoot will come up from the stump of Jesse, from his roots a branch will bear fruit, and the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him. I will put my Spirit on him, and he will bring justice to the nations. The Spirit of the sovereign Lord is on me, because the Lord has anointed me. Interestingly, in Luke's Gospel, chapter 4, 16 through 20, Jesus explicitly identifies himself with the anointed figure spoken of prophetically in Isaiah 61. If Mark were portraying Jesus as the Spirit-filled messianic figure foretold in the prophets, he would be on very good theological grounds. And indeed he is. Mark's very important phrase about Jesus baptizing with the Holy Spirit in verse 8, as well as Mark's quotation of Isaiah 40 in verse 3, where he substitutes kurios, or Lord, in place of theos, or God, in the Septuagint, requires Mark's readers to understand not only that Jesus is the Lord, spoken of in the prophets, but he has the power to baptize with, or impart, the Holy Spirit. As R.T. France notes in his commentary, Mark alerts the reader to the messianic significance of Jesus, both as the one who is himself empowered and directed by the Spirit in the fulfillment of his eschatological role, and also, remarkably, as the one who dispenses the Spirit, a role which in the Old Testament passages was exclusively that of Yahweh himself. Thus, Mark refers to Jesus as the Messiah in the opening verse, and in vivid language casts Jesus' Spirit-filled ministry as a role foretold in Old Testament prophecies. But Mark also takes 2 motifs reserved for Yahweh of the Old Testament, namely Yahweh's triumphant return in Malachi 3 and Isaiah 40, and Yahweh's dispensing of his Holy Spirit in Isaiah 42 and 61, and attributes them to Jesus. Jesus was simultaneously the Messiah and God. He would both send the Spirit and be empowered by the Spirit. And Mark puts all of this in the wilderness. It was in the wilderness that Israel had first learned to trust their God. It was in the wilderness that God proved himself as her king. And it was from the wilderness that many watched for their divine restoration. I will lead her into the wilderness and speak tenderly to her. There she will respond as in the days of her youth, as in the day she came up out of Egypt. And so for Mark, the time had come for God to pour out his Spirit on the Messiah in the wilderness and show that the Old Testament prophecies of restoration were now coming to pass with the arrival of the divine anointed one, Jesus of Nazareth.